I'm John Barber, editor-in-chief at IDW Comics, and I'm here talking with the writer and artist of the series Mountainhead, which has just come out in a collected edition paperback.
I'm John Lees. I am a comic writer based out of Glasgow, Scotland, as you might be able to tell from the voice. I have written a few books, including The Standard, and then Emily Was Gone, and Sync for Comics Tribe. And my most recent book was Hotel from AWA Upshot. So mainly known for my horror books, but I'm not that scary in real life.
My name is Ryan Lee. I'm a comic artist and illustrator. I live in a place called Traverse City in northern Michigan. I've been doing this for close to 10 years now. I've done a bunch of work for Valiant. I worked on Archer and Armstrong. I did some work for Marvel on Marvel Inhumans stuff. And I did this book. And just recently, too, I did a Rick and Morty Deathstalkers one-shot that's coming out this month, too.
Well, let's start off, for reals. Can you tell us a little bit, like in your own words, what Mountainhead is all about?
Mountainhead is a psychological thriller / horror story, which tells the story of Abraham Stubbs. Abraham is a teenage boy who, for as long as he can remember, has been living on the run, always looking over his shoulder. He lives off the grid with his dad. They're convinced that government forces are chasing them, so they burgle houses to survive and try and live as quiet and solitary a life as possible. But the father is becoming increasingly unhinged, increasingly convinced that these unspecified shadowy forces are gaining on them, and Abraham, as he gets older, is becoming less content with his lot in life. And after something happens to turn their lives upside down, Abraham finds himself in this small mountain resort town of Braeriach, where strange and terrifying things start to happen.
Where did the genesis of the story kind of come from for you? Because I know I remember when the pitch came in.
I had read the book that John did with Ian Laurie, and Megan Wilson colored that, correct? The craziest horror story I'd ever read. Super surreal, just fully immersive. And I was like, I want to work with this guy. I think we've got, I don't know, there's some simpatico working here. So I approached him at C2E2 one year, and he was like, man, I love your work. Let's work on something. And next thing you know, the following week, John had a treatment ready to go. After that, he had a whole rough layout of the entire thing. Then he just started cranking on the script. I mean, he's a workhorse. It was amazing.
So I ended up plucking this old idea that I'd had years earlier that I never had anything to go with, which was the story of Abraham and the idea of this kid who finds out his dad's not his real dad. That was a kind of setup that I didn't really have a story for. It was kind of drawing inspiration from the likes of Stephen Stainer and Frederick Bourdain, real life stories of missing kids and stuff. And so once I kind of hooked that into this story engine, and all kind of formed into one greater whole, that felt like, now we have something here. We have all the kind of cool aesthetics and imagery that's going to play into Ryan's strengths, and we also have this kind of human core at the heart of it. And when you're talking about what brought about this idea, why have this approach to horror, for me, more than anything topical, I think with any horror, the best horror is the one that has a kind of a human core of people you care about in it. So I wanted to make sure we had that nailed down before we did anything else.
That bond between Abraham and his father in the story is really one of the keys to the human parts of it. And what can you tell us about that dynamic and how it changes when they grow through the series and when they come face to face with what the ultimate challenge is in the series?
Well, I think that obviously the relationship goes through a lot of changes, because the story's very small at first. Basically, Abraham's whole world is his father. That's the only person he knows, the only person he talks to. And if somebody's your whole world, and then suddenly you find out they're not who they've said they are, and everything you've been told may be a lie, it can kind of turn your whole mooring upside down. And it's like, so part of the story becomes like, how does Abraham figure out who he is without his father? And then when his father eventually comes back into the story, like, how do they redefine their relationship now that they've both been changed so much, both by experience and the circumstances around them?
One of the characters puts it really nicely, but like the idea that an isolated mind is capable of incomprehensible things. Something along those lines. And it's interesting to see it played out so many different ways of the characters. Like Abraham James is sort of set up with his father, but then he also has a stepsister who comes in, and I feel like that's a big emotional core for the series too, is like their relationship and their relationship to the parents. Can you talk a little about that?
Yeah. I think as well, like, you know, a big part of like what fleshes these characters out is like so much of the heavy lifting is done like not even through the dialogue, but through like the expressions and the framing in the page, and like how someone says something that becomes different through how it's framed. And a lot of that was done through Ryan. Like, you know, a lot, like Ryan added a lot of like extra panels in and showing like people gripping certain things. So I think it'd be interesting, maybe like, you know, like for Ryan, if you were to talk a little bit about like, you know, how you thought about framing that dynamic, like, you know, what you added into like, you know, the layouts and stuff to kind of enhance that relationship.
Yeah, I mean, this worked out great because John is so collaborative. Like, I never took away from his script, but I always try. There are times where I'm just like, this scene could be a little more impactful, adding a sequence of, you know, framing it with like red eyes, or, you know, kind of showing the things that Abraham might be seeing, you know, and adding an aspect of like, is this something he's actually seeing? Is this a hallucination? Is it a perception thing? Either way, it helps add, you know, like a tone and kind of a creepy environment to what's going on. And in terms of expressions, like I draw like cartoony-ish, you know, it's a detail, but it's kind of the people's expressions are exaggerated. And so yeah, I really tried to kind of hammer that home with like showing fear. And I mean, there's so much you can do just, you know, making someone's eyebrows move up and down, you know, like I really tried to kind of push that those expressions to kind of bump everything up a little bit. I hope it works.
Really?
Can you go a little more in depth in the your approach to it or your influences or yeah?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, throughout the book, I mean, the psychological aspect of the book from the beginning to the end, I thought really left a lot of room to experiment and do some interesting layouts. So I tried pushing that a lot. And even after I had drawn those sequences, I was like, what's something that I could add to this that would make it kind of stand on its own? Like I wanted to give every page a little something different, you know, something that excited me too to draw. So yeah, I and of course always in service of the story, but like I felt like adding those little things would really make a page look interesting. Like as long as the storytelling reads, doing those little flourishes, I think can only help add. I don't know. It stands alone as like a singular art piece in its own way too, you know, and adds to the emotion of whatever's going on. So I'm glad that resonated.
Cool. I don't know. Do you guys have any last things you wanted to say about Mountainhead?
Pick it up.
Yeah. This lovely graphic novel collected edition is mirror flipped to my screen, I think, but it's available in shops now. Sean Lee, as we mentioned, is the fantastic letterer who's worked with a bunch of other stuff, but is also the designer of this book as well, and put together like an absolutely delicious presentation. I love the book in single issues. I love looking at it digitally, but like as a physical artifact, this is like, you know, the primo version of this book. So if you see this in your shelf and it's lovely, distinctive orange spine, grab it and pick it up. Hope you'll enjoy it.
Yeah, it's a beefy book. I mean, each issue was 24 issues or 24 pages rather. So, you know, you're getting a pretty hearty story here. I'm glad at the time it was a little difficult getting the pages, but you know, it's worth it.
Yeah. So the book is available in print. It is also available digitally if you do prefer your comics that way. You can visit comicshoplocator.com to find a store near you, but the book is available wherever fine graphic novels are sold.